All right, welcome everyone. Today we're going to be talking about the next style of writing for the AP exam. It's called concept application questions. So I'm going to walk you through this presentation over the next few minutes and help you guys to kind of figure out how to do this. So the first thing is points are awarded for describing a process, concept, and a scenario. So you're going to get a little write up, and then you're going to have to go through and analyze it and figure out how it connects to our content. Then you need to explain how that process relates to a different prompted process. So it's all about making connections. And that's why I'm introducing it during Unit 2 when we're talking about the different portions of our government, how they all interact. Then you're going to connect the scenario to a final process. So there's a lot going on here, a lot of critical thinking needed for this write-up. So here's an example of one of the write-ups. Since 2008, the Alliance Defending Freedom, a conservative Christian interest group, has promoted an annual event known as Pulpit Freedom Sunday. On this occasion, pastors are encouraged to challenge a provision of the tax law known as the Johnson Amendment, which prohibits political activity by certain nonprofit organizations, including religious organizations. While the Johnson Amendment does not restrict religious leaders from speaking out regarding social issues, it does prohibit them from contributing money to political campaigns or speaking out in favor of or against candidates running for office. On Pulpit Freedom Sunday, as an act of civil disobedience, pastors and religious leaders preach openly about the moral qualifications of candidates seeking office. So there's your scenario. You don't need to know anything about this topic, about Pulpit Freedom Sunday or the Johnson Amendment, prior to this question. So that's everything you need to know about it. What you are going to need to know is prior knowledge from our course that you can apply into it. So in part A, describe an action Congress could take to address the concerns of the interest group in that scenario. In this case, the Alliance Defending Freedom. B, in the context of the scenario, explain how partisan divisions could prevent the action described in Part A. And then in Part C, explain why the Alliance Defending Freedom might argue that their constitutional rights are threatened by the Johnson Amendment. So here's the scoring rubric. 3 points available here. In Part A, it's talking about what Congress could do. They could pass a law that would reverse the Johnson Amendment. They could pass a law to allow religious organizations to participate more directly in politics. So in Congress's main job, main tool in addressing concerns is always passing a law. Then in Part B, you've got 1 point is earned for explaining in the context of the scenario how partisan divisions could prevent the action. So you have to define what partisan divisions are. The fact that you have Democrats and Republicans that have different ideas. So partisan divisions make it more difficult to pass laws because the parties here adhere to different ideological points of view. You can talk about the Congress and president being from different political parties. You can talk about how Republicans are more in line to defend the religious rights here, and Democrats would be more inclined to keeping politics and religion separate. Okay, and then Part C, 1 point is earned for explaining why the Alliance Defending Freedom might argue that their constitutional rights are threatened. So they could talk about the First Amendment, that their freedom of speech or their freedom of religion. You want to be specific. One of those two is being violated. So now let's look at how some of the students handled these in the samples provided by the College Board. So here's one that got full credit. Congress can pass a provision of the Johnson Amendment. The provision can allow religious leaders to speak for or against certain candidates. Therefore, the Johnson Amendment can only restrict contributions of money. Addresses the prompt directly. This new provision can lead to partisan divisions because it's more conservative or Republican plan. Perfect. So they're set in the context of what partisan divisions are. Now they're going to have to apply what that means to this scenario. Congress today is more divided between the two parties. Democratic lawmakers will not agree with this new provision because it gives religious groups too much power and somewhat weakens the division between church and state. So that's how they connected it. So they defined religious differences between the parties, and then they connected it to the scenario. Without that connection to the scenario, no point is awarded. So they got that point there by saying why Democrats would oppose it. Part C, the Alliance Defending Freedom can argue that their First Amendment rights are threatened by the Johnson Amendment. This is because religious leaders or organizations cannot publicly support a candidate, therefore it limits their free speech. There they've got their point earned. And you can see that in the rubric explanations, it shows you exactly where each of those points were earned and the exact phrasing. Again, you'll have access to this PowerPoint as well as this talk, so you can always go back and review. This student got 2 of the 3 points. So due to the harm of interest groups alerting out civil disobedience, which can be very harming to the public, Congress can ask for the interest group to peacefully voice their concerns to Congress. No point's been earned yet. Congress can accommodate for their needs and pass laws to address the concerns of interest groups that relate to their goal or policy agenda, such as religion in this case. That's where they earn the point. So that's 1 point for Part A. Partisan divisions could prevent these deletions by framing a system where their religion can influence a campaign and where issues that relate to interest groups can be accommodated for. A little weak there. The Alliance Defending Freedom can argue about their constitutional rights are being threatened because it goes against the First Amendment and their right to religion for a case against the Johnson Amendment. That one, they got the point. So as you can see, nothing in Part B. They didn't explain partisan divisions. They kind of danced around it. They didn't define it. So no points there. They got Part A for pass laws to address the concern, and they got Part C by talking about their right to religious freedom in Amendment 1. Now here's one that got just 1 point. Congress could take the conservative Christian interest group to court. No, Congress doesn't sue interest groups. Part B, partisan divisions could prevent the actions by arguing it is the group's right to protest against the tax. Again, it doesn't even define what partisan divisions is, doesn't even mention Democrats and Republicans. No points there, so they've lost points 1 and 2. Okay, Part C, the Alliance Defending Freedom could argue that their constitutional rights are threatened by the Johnson Amendment because they feel that the amendment isn't allowing them a freedom of speech because they aren't allowed to have any political activity or contribute money. That's spot on. That's a point. So they got the 1 out of the 3. All right, so that's just a little rundown of what a concept application essay is. You really want to make sure that you're addressing the prompt, that you're making connections, that you're walking things back. Now, in addition to this brief overview, I have in the PowerPoint presentation linked an AP Graders trading on this question. So you can go through even more, another question, more practice, more reinforcement of it.